No one noticed the music. No one tasted the food. All eyes were on one man. Asterisk, asterisk. He stood alone near the back of the grand wedding hall, where the lights were dimmer and the laughter felt distant. His black suit was simple, clean, and neatly pressed. Not new, but worn with care. His shoes were polished, his posture straight, his hands calm as they rested in front of him, holding a small, carefully wrapped gift. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. He didn't look angry or suspicious. And yet, guests avoided him. Every time he took a step forward, something strange happened. Conversations that were once full of excitement suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Smiles faded. Laughter softened into awkward silence. Chairs scraped quietly against the floor as people shifted away, creating small but noticeable gaps around him. Some guests pretended not to see him at all. Others whispered behind raised hands, their eyes darting toward him and then quickly away, as if being noticed looking at him would be a mistake. A few glanced at him openly, long enough to judge, but not long enough to understand. The hall itself was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers glowed above rows of decorated tables. Women wore bright dresses. Men wore expensive suits, and the air smelled of fresh flowers and rich food. Everywhere there was warmth, color, and a celebration. Everywhere except around him. Around him, there was only space. Only silence. He felt it, of course. He wasn't blind to the way people moved away or how their expressions changed when he came near. He noticed the empty chair beside him that no one chose. He noticed the tight smiles and nervous glances. He noticed everything, but he didn't react. He didn't confront anyone. He didn't look angry or embarrassed. He didn't leave. Instead, he quietly adjusted the sleeves of his jacket, smoothing out a crease as if this moment required patience rather than protest. His face remained calm, almost gentle, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had experienced this before, someone who knew what it felt like to be judged without being known. He stood there waiting, not waiting for attention, not waiting for apologies, waiting because he believed he belonged there. No one asked him who he was. No one asked how he knew the bride or the groom. No one wondered about the gift he carried so carefully, as if it meant more than words. They had already made up their minds. In their eyes, his presence didn't need an explanation. Their assumptions were enough. And so, in the middle of a room full of people, surrounded by celebration and joy, the man stood completely alone, quiet, patient, and unseen, while the wedding continued, unaware that everything was about to change. "This is a high-class wedding," one guest muttered under his breath, adjusting his expensive jacket as his eyes followed the man's movements. "Who invited him?" another whispered, leaning closer so no one else could hear, though many were already thinking the same thing. Judgment traveled faster than the music in the hall. Some guests assumed the man was part of the staff, perhaps security or catering, even though his suit didn't match theirs. Others assumed something worse, something they didn't dare say out loud. Their expressions said enough. Tight lips, raised eyebrows, uncomfortable glances exchanged across tables. Not a single person assumed he belonged there as a guest. The groom's relatives watched him with visible confusion. A few leaned together, trying to trace his connection to the family, coming up empty every time. On the bride's side, the tension was even clearer. Some women stopped smiling altogether. A few elders shook their heads slowly, their faces filled with quiet disapproval, as if his presence alone threatened the perfection of the occasion. This wedding was supposed to be flawless, elegant, respectable, and to them, he fell out of place. But the man didn't leave. He didn't turn around when he felt eyes burning into his back. He didn't step outside to avoid the stares. He didn't lower his head in shame. Instead, he remained where he was, near the aisle, close enough to see the stage clearly. In his hands, he held a small, carefully wrapped gift. The paper was simple, the ribbon neatly tied. He handled it gently, as though it carried more than just a present, perhaps memories, promises, or years of quiet sacrifice folded inside. His eyes never wandered around the hall. He wasn't watching the guests. He wasn't reacting to the whispers. His gaze was fixed on one place only, the stage where the bride would soon appear. There was no anger in his expression, no resentment, no fear, only calm, a calm that felt out of place in a room full of judgment. He stood tall, shoulders relaxed, breathing slow and steady. The kind of stillness that comes from knowing who you are, even when the world around you refuses to see it. The kind of strength built not from approval, but from endurance. It was as if he was waiting for a moment that only he understood, as if all the whispers, the stares, and the assumptions didn't matter, because they were temporary. As if he knew that the truth, when it arrived, would speak louder than every judgment made against him. And so he waited, while guests whispered, while elders frowned, while the hall buzzed with quiet discomfort. The man stood there, calm and unmoving, holding his gift and his silence, like someone carrying a secret that would soon change everything. Because deep down, whether they realized it or not, he knew something they didn't. And very soon, they were all going to find out. The music changed. A soft hush swept through the hall as every guest turned instinctively toward the entrance. The doors opened slowly, and the bride stepped inside. She was radiant. Her white dress shimmered under the golden lights, flowing gently with each step she took. A glowing smile rested on her face, the kind that came from pure happiness, and her eyes sparkled with excitement and love. For a moment, everything else disappeared, the whispers, the tension, the quiet judgment. The guests rose from their seats, admiration written across their faces. Cameras lifted, phones recorded. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. As the bride walked down the aisle, the atmosphere softened. Smiles returned. Hearts relaxed. The room filled once again with warmth and celebration. But then, something unexpected happened. Halfway down the aisle, the bride slowed her steps. Then she stopped. The music, once full and joyful, began to fade until only silence remained. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests glanced at the groom, wondering if something had gone wrong. Others leaned forward in their seats, unsure of what they were witnessing. The groom looked puzzled, concern briefly crossing his face. Then the bride turned, not toward him, not toward the officiant. She turned toward the back of the hall, toward him, toward the man everyone had ignored, the man everyone had judged, the man who stood quietly near the aisle, holding a small wrapped gift. A visible wave of confusion swept through the room. Heads turned, eyes followed her gaze. Whispers sparked again, sharper this time, filled with disbelief. Why was she looking at him? The bride raised her microphone. Her hands were steady, but her eyes shone with emotion. The room fell into complete silence, so quiet that even the soft hum of the lights could be heard. Then she spoke. "Before I marry the love of my life," she said gently, her voice clear and strong, "I need to honor the man who gave me mine." The words hung in the air. Some guests frowned, not yet understanding. Others felt a sudden tightness in their chest, sensing something important was about to be revealed. The bride took a slow breath. Her gaze never left the man at the back of the hall. A soft smile appeared on her lips, one filled with gratitude, memory, and deep love. Her eyes glistened with tears as she spoke again. And then she said his name. The sound of it echoed through the hall like a truth long overdue. Gasps followed instantly. Hands flew to mouths. A few guests straightened in their seats, suddenly aware of how wrong they had been. The man's shoulders stiffened slightly as he heard it. His grip tightened around the gift. For the first time since entering the hall, emotion broke through his calm expression. In that single moment, the silence shifted. It was no longer uncomfortable. It was powerful, and everyone in that room understood something had just changed forever. "This is Daniel Thompson," the bride said, her voice cutting clearly through the sudden hush of the hall. Gasps filled the room. Guests instinctively leaned forward, their eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Some clutched their hands over their chests, as though they had just realized something they should have known all along. The whispers stopped. Even the soft hum of the music vanished into the heavy silence that now hung between the tables and the stage. The bride's voice remained steady, yet filled with emotion that made every word land with weight. When I was 6 years old, she began, I lost my parents in an accident. I was scared, alone, forgotten. No one noticed me. No one cared. Her gaze swept over the hall, locking briefly on the faces of people who had avoided Daniel since he arrived. Daniel, she continued, her voice softening but never faltering, was the man who found me sitting outside a closed shelter, shivering and crying, with no one to turn to, and he refused to walk away. A collective shiver ran through the crowd. Some guests shifted in their seats. Others lowered their heads, realizing how wrong they had been to judge a man they barely knew. The bride paused, taking a deep, steadying breath. He worked 2 jobs just to make sure I had something to eat. He skipped meals so I could have enough. He even sold his old car to pay for my school supplies. Also, I could go to school. Also, I could have a future. The words landed like stones, sinking deep into the hearts of everyone present. The people who had been so quick to judge now sat frozen, unable to look away. There was no longer confusion. There was understanding and a pang of guilt. Then the bride stepped off the stage. Slowly, deliberately, she walked toward Daniel. The camera, or rather, the eyes of every guest, followed her. The man who had been invisible, who had been avoided, now stood at the center of attention. His calm, quiet presence radiated something undeniable: dignity, strength, and love that had gone unnoticed for far too long. When she reached him, she placed her hand gently over his. "This man," she said, her voice cracking slightly but holding steady, "is my father, not by blood, but by love." Tears rolled down Daniel's face. For the first time all evening, his reserved calm broke, replaced by raw emotion, gratitude, humility, and love. He had given so much, quietly, and now the world finally saw him as he truly was. The same people who had avoided him, who had whispered and judged, could no longer look away. Shame replaced judgment. Respect replaced fear. Their eyes, once filled with suspicion, now glimmered with admiration. A few wiped tears from their cheeks. Others stood silently, acknowledging the gravity of what had just been revealed. In that moment, the wedding hall transformed. It was no longer just a place of celebration. It had become a place of recognition, of truth, of honor. Daniel Thompson, the man who had given so much and asked for nothing in return, finally received the acknowledgement he deserved. And in the hearts of everyone present, a lesson was etched forever. True love, true sacrifice, and true greatness often go unseen until the moment is right. The bride stepped closer to Daniel and threw her arms around him. She held him tightly, pressing her face into his chest, as if trying to convey every ounce of gratitude and love she had ever felt. Daniel wrapped his arms around her in return, hesitant at first, but soon his embrace matched hers, strong, protective, and full of emotion. The hall erupted. Applause rang out, loud and unstoppable, filling the room with a wave of energy that washed away every tense whisper and judgmental glance from earlier. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't the polite smiles of social obligation. It was heartfelt, raw, and completely uncontrollable. Tears streamed down the faces of many guests. Some sobbed openly, unable to contain their emotion. Others stood silently, heads bowed in quiet regret, realizing just how wrong they had been to judge a man they barely knew. The groom approached slowly, his expression a mix of respect and humility. He extended his hand toward Daniel. "Thank you for raising the woman I love," he said sincerely, his voice steady but filled with meaning. It wasn't a formality. It was a recognition of the sacrifices Daniel had made, the years of unseen devotion that had shaped the woman he now called his bride. Daniel's eyes softened, and for the first time, he spoke in the hall where all eyes were now on him. His voice was low, calm, but carried the weight of a life lived with quiet purpose. "I didn't come here to be seen," he said. "I didn't come for recognition. I didn't come for applause. I came to see her happy." His words echoed through the hall, leaving an almost tangible silence in their wake. It was not anger, nor sadness, but a profound sense of truth. And in that silence, everything changed. Guests slowly began moving toward him. Some offered handshakes. Others embraced him, unsure of what to say but desperate to express newfound respect. Chairs were pulled out, invitations extended, apologies whispered, small gestures of acknowledgement that came too late for judgment, but just in time for understanding. Yet Daniel didn't need them. He didn't seek praise. He didn't require validation. He had already received what mattered most. The knowledge that the girl he raised, the woman he had loved and protected, was now happy, loved, and safe. In that moment, the wedding transformed. It was no longer just a celebration of love between two people. It had become a celebration of truth, a lesson in humility, and a reminder of what real greatness looks like. The room that had once been full of judgment and unease was now full of awe, admiration, and respect. That day, every guest learned a lesson they would not forget. Never judge someone by how they look. Never assume someone's worth. And never forget, real greatness often stands quietly, waiting to be seen. ***. Daniel's story, his sacrifices, and his quiet strength left a mark on every heart present. And long after the music ended, long after the cake was cut and the dancing concluded, the memory of that moment, the revelation, the embrace, the truth, would remain in the hall, in their minds, and in their lives forever. It was a wedding that changed more than just two lives. It changed everyone who witnessed it.